Beyond the headlines. This is World Insight.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei and happy the year of the horse. After the British Prime Minister's visit to China, London and Beijing pledged to build a long-term, steady, comprehensive strategic partnership. They seek to turn the huge potential relations into tangible results. What does that mean in practice? For starters, starting February the 17th, ordinary British passport holders can visit China visa-free. On this and more, I had an exclusive interview with British Ambassador to China, Peter Wilson, CMG. He talks about the momentum in engagement and why seeing the whole elephant, not just part of it, matters for China and Britain. Ms. Ambassador, what a pleasure to see you in your residence. Thank you so much for the hospitality.
It's really nice to see you, Tian Wei, and it's really nice to see you again.
Great to see you again for this very successful visit by the Prime Minister to China. Both sides since then have been talking about what they agreed upon, if I could read.
Yes.
Committed to developing long-term, comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries.
Yes.
And transforming the great potential of the bilateral relations into tangible achievements. Now,
yes.
Mr. Ambassador, how you and your team, both here and back in London, working hard to make it possible?
Words that the Prime Minister's been using actually ever since that he met President Xi at the G20 in Brazil in November 2024, where he talked about a long-term, consistent strategic relationship with China. That's what we've been trying to build over time. But it also has this very important Chinese concept of a comprehensive strategic partnership, which puts our relationship into the kind of category of two P5 countries talking to each other that we both believe is very important. So I'm very, very pleased that we've come up with a term that brings all of that to bear, because signalling matters. On the tangible outcomes, the signalling matters because it then allows us to move forward in a very practical way on security issues, and we have a series of agreements and channels that we've created through this visit, on trade issues and economic issues more broadly, where we've agreed that we're going to work harder to get UK exports up to China, that we're going to work towards a legally binding services agreement. That's a really big deal. And on global challenges, where we are talking now about raising the level of our dialogue. We have a very strong dialogue. We've had it actually for decades with China on climate and on nature, but where we take it to a new level. And there's a whole bunch of stuff I could talk about that. But I mean, that's quite a big agenda. Yeah. That's probably why I've got no hair.
It's a very ambitious agenda, shall I say.
It is.
So what can we expect nearest to the time we're talking right now by these mechanisms and dialogues?
So I hope that in the next few months that we are able to see an uptick in our cross-border trade. I actually think that there is a lot of space for really fantastic UK products to come to the China market. One of the nice things about this story is that actually people in the UK who may have been thinking China's very far away, it's a difficult market, are hearing stories about Brompton, Jellycat, who've actually exported very successful. We export bicycles to China. That's quite something. I think the second thing is that in the sort of services.
The symbol of bicycle.
Exactly. The second thing is sort of on, the area of real big advantage for the UK, which is services. That's our big strength. Actually being able to talk about some of the barriers to trade that exist. They exist in every market, but there are barriers to trade with China in services. We are underrepresented in terms of the size of our overall size of our economy in services. I think we can turn that around. And our banks and our legal firms and our consultancies have a lot to offer to China, not just in terms of trading with the UK, but actually in helping China go global, because we're everywhere. So I think that's really exciting. So in terms of sort of concrete stuff, I would hope that we are able to see an uptick in exports. I would also hope that we see an uptick in investment both ways. There was a big AstraZeneca investment into China, $15 billion announced in this trip. I expect over the next 12 months we will see significant Chinese investments into the UK too. That's good for both of us.
So how well do you think, Ms. Ambassador, from the UK side, can provide services and policies catering to the business community's, urgent demands about cooperation?
I think that on the sort of more broadly on the services side, we have a lot of firms. I mean, HSB and Standard Chartered at the front, but Freshfields were on this trip as well. It's a massive global legal firm. PwC, massive global consultancy firm, one of the big four. Those firms are all saying we want to do more with China, and we have things that we've got. I mean, there are so many things that China's teaching us, but there are some things where we are really strong at this internationally, and I really think we can help each other on that.
It's mutually
That's
beneficial.
the signal.
Absolutely.
It is totally mutually beneficial.
Mr. Ambassador, though, many are expecting what we are seeing today can be sustainable, but they also question whether they can be sustainable.
So, Tianwen, look, I think that's a really fair question. I think our relationship's gone through ups and downs. The Prime Minister was really clear about this, and he's been very clear about it in the UK. We're not sort of re-entering a golden era. We don't want an ice age. What we're trying to do is just stabilise this relationship and give people confidences. It's sort of mamalai. We're just steadily trying to build confidence between each other. And there are two parts of that. One is talking about the opportunities that we've just talked about. The other is how do we deal with difference. 求同存异. That was something the Prime Minister said in English in the Great Hall of the People. It was also something that President Xi said in Chinese. We're both trying to do that with each other. China's role in the world is so large. It has so much more of an impact on the lives of our people in the UK. These are new, relatively new things that people are dealing with. So we have to be able to deal with the differences too. That, in my view, gives us greater confidence for the future than just smiling each other and talking past each other. That's not what we did on this trip.
Many have noticed the Prime Minister, not only during his trip about what he said, but also after that.
Yes.
We noticed the latest speech he was making in the House of Commons and suggesting one should not put his head into the sand,
Yes.
But rather should proactively try to promote national interests for the UK, while at the same time building partnerships. So, Mr. Ambassador, sitting where you are in that chair, how do you see what UK has learned?
Gosh, lots of things. So, I mean, the first thing is, China's changed a lot even in the last 8 years, and it's certainly changed a lot since I last worked here 15 years ago. I think the second thing is that we have been building towards this over time. We've had a series of high-level dialogues, economic and financial dialogue with our finance minister and He Lifeng in January, environmental exchange both ways with our ministers, a strategic dialogues when Director Wang Yi went to the UK to see our then Foreign Minister, now Deputy Prime Minister, trade talks with our Trade Minister, who flew all the way from Washington 24 hours on his birthday to come straight to Beijing on day 5 of his new job. Science talks, our Minister for Science was here in November. It means that our top people are coming to China, or your top people are going to the UK, and we're actually at that level seeing things for ourselves. And honestly, that's necessary. What I really hope now in this next phase is that, actually partly also thanks to visa-free access, great thing, that more people come in this direction to see for themselves. We have a large number of Chinese people who are actually either studying in or working in the UK. We want more people to come in this direction to see for themselves. It's about seeing the whole elephant.
Yes, indeed, that analogy has been used by the Prime Minister during his trip to China.
It was.
We also noticed that was also an idiom used by Chinese President Xi
Exactly.
when he was receiving ambassadors from all over the world, and the very first time for you to present the credentials. So how do you see that analogy apply to the changing world that we're in the middle of, and also this evolving relationship between UK and China?
So I think one thing that our Prime Minister said that was very important was we want a more sophisticated relationship with China. And I think we need, frankly, a more sophisticated understanding of each other. President Xi says, leaders need to go beyond Beijing and Shanghai. Prime Minister was very taken by that and definitely wants to see more. I think in general, we need to understand the vastness of China, the development is not the same in every place, and that different people need different things. The other thing is the opportunity is different in different places. So if you take, for example, one or two of our companies, they are not necessarily the most successful in Beijing or Shanghai. They might be the most successful in Inner Mongolia or in Gansu. That is beginning to happen because the overall level of development in China has risen so much. But because it's uneven, competition varies in different places. We need to do a lot more of all of that. But the story of the blind men feeling the elephant is a very powerful one because each of them sees something different. And the Prime Minister is very, very keen for our people to understand, and for China to understand about us as well, that it really is important to see the whole elephant.
We have been talking to members and delegates from the delegation from the UK, making of the business and the cultural representatives. Some of them have been telling me, I don't care where the political wind blows. I'm going to be here and work with my Chinese partners because it's important for my existence, they told me, and also the development of their businesses and their career. So how do you think the government and the policymakers are really listening closely to these real voices coming from the British society and adjust policies accordingly?
So look, I think they make a really important point. We actually don't want to politicize trade. I mean, trade is not a completely apolitical business, let's be honest. But we don't want to actively politicize trade. We want to provide a stable environment that gives confidence for our companies to trade with each other. We don't like it when there are blocks to trade. That's why we're a free trading nation. The nature and shape of our economy is built on that. And that's why we promote free trade around the world. It means we don't like barriers like tariffs. We don't love restrictions on rare earths. We want to open things up, not close them down. And I think in a global environment that is more tense and definitely becoming more complex in which to operate, it's really important for us that we just try to calm all of that down so that our businesses really can find mutual advantage. And it has to be mutual, otherwise it doesn't work. Mutual advantage in trading with each other. We think we've got a lot to offer, and we think we've got a lot to gain.
But at the same time, the public understanding of each other is so crucial.
It is.
When policymakers are making your policies, it has to be based on consensus. So how is the government, including your embassy here, trying to promote that understanding, especially in the UK society, about what is going on inside China, about the significance of these bilateral relations?
So my approach to this is not to tell people what to think, but just to give them the facts. And I think on the facts, there is so much going on here, so much that is new, so much that is driven by these very, very innovative companies who want to engage with our firms, that I like to tell those stories so that people can focus on what is possible for them. So what I want to do as an embassy is to help our people navigate what is a very different environment for them. That's really important. If we can do that, then I think we can increase the kind of mutually beneficial exchange that we've been talking about. And that's not just in trade, it's also in culture, it's also in education, it's also in pure scientific research. And I'm really proud that for our scientists, we publish more joint research papers with China than any other country in the world other than the United States. That's really important for our scientists, and it's exciting.
Ever wondered what's actually going on in Africa through the perspective of an African? How are things really going between China and Africa? What's the narrative of this relationship? Well, get a perspective with China-Africa Talk. Hear from African diplomats, entrepreneurs, academics, Chinese natives, and more. Get on our wavelength every week to find out what's real with China-Africa Talk. Find us on your favorite podcast. We'll see you there.
Sideline Story brings you all things sports related. The hottest topics, latest events, juiciest stories, all with a very personal take. Subscribe to Sideline Story Podcast for heated sports discussions covering events that are happening in China and around the world.
We have seen the world is changing in such a speed that every one of us is struggling every day in order to catch up with what is going on right now, particularly in recent months. So what do you make of it, Peter, as the ambassador representing the UK, the latest visits, series of visits by some of the most developed economies in the world, whether it's Canada or the UK or some of the other European countries, to China? And how does the UK look at all these partners and competitors might be able to communicate with China clearly about the potential?
So look, I mean, not for me to sort of speak for the Chinese side on this, and I wouldn't presume to, but from our point of view, our visit here was a long-planned thing. And the result, as I've said, of a sort of series of exchanges leading up to it, and a very successful meeting between the Prime Minister and President Xi way back in November 2024. I think there's a slight tendency at the moment in a sort of globally volatile environment to see everything through the prism of something else. We do not see our relationship with China through the prism of other relationships. And the PM was very, very clear, and he was clear when he was here, and he was clear in Parliament in the UK. We do not think that we choose between relationships. We have a very strong alliance with the United States that's extremely important for our national interest. We have a growing closeness to other countries in Europe. We are a European country. And we've particularly had very strong exchanges with France and Germany at leader level in the recent months. We want a stronger and more stable relationship with China. And I think this visit demonstrated that we can do that. And we have important relationships elsewhere in the world. So all of that is not only possible, it's necessary, and it's good for the world. And I think actually, as both of our leaders said to each other, it's good for the world when the UK and China are working on global problems together. It's part of our nature. It's also highly necessary.
What about cultural understanding? I mean, Mr. Ambassador, this is already your third time being posted as a diplomat. Back in the 1990s and 2000s, and this time as ambassador. So what have you learned through these very different times interacting with China, with the Chinese people? How does that do your job and help you to find your anchor in a changing world?
It's a great question, but just very briefly on the international system. And one thing that my Prime Minister was very keen to talk about was the centrality of the United Nations in the international system. And because we support the rules-based international order, I think both leaders agreed that the UN as the centre of the international system was something very important to support. But just coming back to the question, the hard question, I was giving myself time to think, the hard question that you asked me, I think, for me, it is very nice, well, not just nice, but it's important for me to be able to have reference points that could go quite long into the past.
So back in the 1980s.
Way back in the 80s. Yeah. So my first trip to Beijing was in 1981. I was 13, so you can now work out how old I am. But I came in 1981 with my younger brother and with my mum and my dad. And it made an indelible impression on me. So I think what really struck me was not sort of, I mean, I went to the Temple of Heaven, went to the Forbidden City, went to the Summer Palace, all that kind of stuff. But it's actually riding on bicycles through the streets and talking to a couple of my dad's old Chinese friends way back from the 1960s. And just getting a feel for a country that was looking out to the world, just beginning to do that. It was a very exciting time, but it was so utterly different from today. And if you'd asked me then to imagine what China would be today, I would not have predicted quite how fast that would move. Cut to the 90s when I came here to study Mandarin at Beijing in northeast Beijing. There, I think what was really interesting was just sort of like having a chance to be with Chinese students who were kind enough to speak to me in Chinese rather than their actually rather good English, and just sort of like learn what it felt like to feel on a campus. And then how to interact as a young commercial officer with people, where it took time to build trust because, you know, dealing internationally was unfamiliar. Cut to the 2007, everything was moving faster. If you didn't have something to say in meeting number one, you didn't get meeting number two. Now, cut to today, that speed is off the charts. So China's speed is a thing. People want to be practical. They want to search for solutions. They want to do stuff together. And that's what I want to do as well. It's ichi ban sha. Just do stuff together. And people have a lot of choice. There are a lot of people coming. There's a lot of interaction with China in the outside world. We just need to be really practical about where we have mutual advantages and then follow that through. And I think we have an opportunity to do that because I think, honestly, there is such a big interest in the UK and China and a desire to increase our knowledge and such a strong Chinese exchange with the UK. We've just reached 1 million alumni from British universities now back in China. That's quite something. It's a very strong base on which to build understanding.
I see you so actively interacting with Chinese from so many different walks of life, on the streets, in the schools, of course in the ministries, and also with your Chinese colleagues, and the list goes on. What does this help you to understand what the Chinese want? Who are they? How are they different or similar with you? How do they see their kids going to the UK? Or the British kids come to learn Chinese and the Chinese culture? I'm sure you already have a bank of these people, how they interact with you. Tell me more about that.
The first thing that strikes me about coming back to today's China is just the sheer diversity and variety of people, of types of things that they're interested in, and the way we interact. I think the second thing is, and I think it's one of the reasons I like doing business here, is people are really practical. People cut to the chase. I quite like the bluntness. And people are polite. Respect is an important concept in Chinese culture. It's an important concept in British culture too. But behind that, I think, is just a sort of very practical desire to get things done. I love that. I think the third thing is, traveling around, you just get a really strong sense of, how different parts of China are. So China's not a concept, it's a country. And I think when you're looking from a long way away, China is a very big country. And I think it's dangerous to see China as a single thing. It is a single country, but it's a country that contains almost infinite variety. And I think sometimes we don't always see that. I actually happen to think the same about the UK, where people see things refracted through, particularly London. I'm a Scot, so I believe very, very strongly that, different parts of the UK, we're a much smaller country, but different parts of the UK are also not terribly well understood overseas. What I love about the curiosity of China and the outward-looking nature of this place is there are Chinese people who have spent serious amounts of time in lots of different parts of my country. I'd like to see us doing the same in this direction.
Being pragmatic and do real things is so crucial. How precious is time for China and the UK to catch this opportunity?
So, I think it's important to take opportunities when they arise, and I do think we've got momentum, and I'm very, very keen to capitalize on that. I have a really amazing team spread across this country, a huge amount of interest in the UK, very, very keen to catch that. I think at the same time, there are some things that just, take a little bit of patience, and I'm very, very keen that we put in place not only sort of ability to follow up very rapidly on the opportunities that this visit has created, but also that we slowly over time build the kind of structures that allow this relationship to continue, whatever the political volatility that is happening in the world at the time. So I think both things are important, and it's important to do both at the same time. But I genuinely believe that we understand each other better by doing stuff together.
Final question. A lot of kids might be watching our conversation or excerpts of it. So many of them are studying in the UK already, and some are also willing to come to China. Any advice from an alumni, so to speak, that has been learning both cultures, and someone who is sitting in this important position trying to promote the relationship across the two sides?
So, just sort of thinking about this and trying to think about it through the eyes of my own children, I think that I think we do live in an age of sort of information proliferation. I think it's really important. I'm actually quite impressed by young people and how they're able to filter stuff. There's much more information now than there was when I was growing up. So distinguishing between what's true and what's simply opinion, I think is really, really hard, but incredibly important. So focus on facts. I think the second thing is, in a world that is changing very rapidly, nobody's got a monopoly on predictions about the future. But if you follow what you love and you're true to who you are, that sounds very superficial. But I've really found that useful, and I notice that people who tend to be both happiest and most successful are able to focus on that, what they love and who they are, and be true to their own values. And if you can do that, then I think that all of the volatility gets put into perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. What a pleasure. And thank you once again for the hospitality from you and your team.
Thank you so much, Tianwei. It's so nice to do this again.
And that is my exclusive interview with Peter Wilson, CMG, the British ambassador to China. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tianwei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now.